Welcome to Soft Cock Appreciation Week 2024. I invite you to get comfortable as you join us for what I like to call cockversations, discussions, or grown folk putting their heads together and sharing ideas in authentic and real ways. Now be aware we don't hold back in our language, and what follows is not for overly sensitive or easily kerfuffled ears. And before we dive in, remember, what is shared here is not meant to be, nor is it a replacement for medical advice. Whenever you notice changes in your body or that of a loved one, especially in how the penis is functioning, please seek out medical consultation. What the penis is saying could literally save a life. Thank you for supporting us. If you take away something useful from this, please let us know, write a review, spread the word, and keep coming back for more. Are you ready? Let's do it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Soft Cock Appreciation Week 2024. I'm your hostess for this year, Erica Leroye, and I am very excited to have with me today Courtney Brame. We crossed paths kind of in the atmosphere of Portland, Oregon over the last few years, and then you left, and then I left, so we're both in new places. And then we reconnected through Michelle Renee and the Intimacy Pros group. And Michelle said, hey, as you're thinking about Soft Cock Appreciation Week, Courtney is definitely someone you should be talking to. He's doing some incredible new things with working with men. And I was like, I've been waiting to have this conversation. So I'm so happy that you're with us, that you're willing to be with us this year. Courtney, welcome to Soft Cock Appreciation Week. Tell us a little bit about you, what you're bringing to the world, and then we'll go into our themes for today.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's interesting timing because I think we both left Portland like very shortly after one another. So
Mhm.
um, my name is Courtney Brame. I'm the founder, executive director, and podcast host and program manager of Something Positive for Positive People, which is a nonprofit supporting people living with herpes and teaching people how to communicate about their sexual wellness and relationships from a pleasure and safety perspective. And I do the same thing for Self. This is a men's emotional wellness resource. It's fairly new. I got the idea around the middle of June this year to host a men's emotional wellness symposium. I've been to a lot of men's mental health things, seminars, and I've listened to podcasts, and everyone's saying to men, talk about your feelings, fix your mental health, right? But
Mhm.
no one is really giving us the resources we need in order to navigate the language around our emotions and helping us with being able to identify and then communicate about them. So I
Mm.
put together this emotional wellness symposium, and I just had four conversations with men that I've seen demonstrate emotional availability, and this went really, really well. I was able to raise a little bit of money from it to get the ball rolling on the next project, which was making it a nonprofit and continuing to host that podcast. That podcast is just me. I process my therapy sessions and I would talk about different experiences that I was having. And you'll go through different exercises and practices in order to give people like an example of what it looks like to do, quote, the work.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, other than that, I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher. I'm currently enrolled in yoga therapy training. This is an offering that I'm wanting to work towards giving to the world, like traditional therapies. I don't think it's really what we need. I think it can
Mm.
be helpful, but I think that there's a lot of inaccessibility to like your licensed mental health professional
Mhm.
versus one who has training, who might be certified and able to speak to the thing that is clearly screaming at the world, which is that men and our emotions are unsafe simply because we're unable to identify and be aware of them and take the power that's in those emotions and be able to um, put that into some sort of a creative outlet or serve our community or foster healthy relationships. And I said community, but I think that that is such a big deal for us to be those foundational structures in communities that we go out and create. So aside from that, I live in New Jersey. I just moved out here to be closer to New York and do more of my work because I was coming out here a lot for the sexual health and wellness stuff, the advocacy that I do.
Mm.
And yeah, it made more sense to just go ahead and move out here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, the work that you have been bringing to the world and what you're continuing to bring to the world is really needed and it's exciting. And I can't agree more with you in that the barriers, the system that's set up, although I'm grateful for, what there is in terms of mental health and the fact that we're even talking about it in ways that we weren't, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, for sure. But to get more, especially for men, to get more men to be able to connect with other men, especially, Black men, Hispanic men, that there just aren't that many providers. It's a lot of money and a lot of steps to become a licensed mental health provider. And there's a lot of us who are out there who have experience, who have knowledge about kind of how to get through the shit, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we're trying, that's a big part of what we're trying to do. What I'm trying to do in curating this week is also to really demonstrate and offer to people that outside of the traditional ways of getting help, there are a lot of other people who are here saying, I have some things that can be helpful.
Yes. And I've heard for years, oh, Courtney, you should be a therapist. You should be a therapist. And I'm so resistant to having to go back to school
Mhm.
and go through I sound like I'm hating on therapists and therapy, but I do believe that it is valuable. All right. One of the things therapy did for me was give me practice sorting through, fumbling through, speaking about situations,
Mhm.
and then developing language around how to communicate about the situation. It did not do that much for me learning my emotions. And I feel like I got so much more out of that through reading, through yoga therapy, through community engagement. So I never want to disconnect myself from the community that I'm serving to go to school and learn about, these studies that are done on people, I guess, and like
Mhm.
the treatment plans. And here's how you talk to so and so, because every individual is different. And so many people are not being asked questions. Like you're given the opportunity to talk, and people are so quick and ready to diagnose someone with something.
Mhm.
No
Yeah.
one's really taking the steps of expressing curiosity in a person, and we're really missing that presence, that humanness, that human connection. Not to say that like you need to intuit everything or you will get it right 100% of the time, but so many of us just need to feel emotionally safe. And
Mhm.
when it comes to uh men and emotions, right, like we don't really feel safe with our own emotions because of the unpredictability, and it makes perfect sense, right? Like I don't understand this thing, so why am I going to further engage with it? And no one's telling me to engage with it. Everyone's expecting so much out of me. I'm supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to do these things. And when those things don't align with us, no one's even pointing us in the direction of inquiring, why might that be? And
Mhm.
so the
Mhm.
somatic elements of checking in with your body, your breathing, and identifying, okay, this situation happened. What is this feeling that I'm having? I recognize that there's tension in my shoulders, that I'm like slouched over. I'm becoming
Yeah.
small about some things. Maybe I get aggressive. So for us to be able to first identify these body sensations, identify what emotion is coming up for us, then we can start to get into the talking about it. Then
Mhm.
we can start to seek out treatment. But we're constantly being told that the answer is somewhere else or that someone else has all the answers, and no one's giving us the tools that we need in order to find the answers within ourselves.
Mm. That's so true. And as you're saying that, the couple of things that come up for me are, first of all, especially in this world of intimacy and sexuality, as someone who grew up in the women's movement I'm in my mid 50s, so I grew up with a lot of, feminine empowerment, especially around sexuality. So from a very early age, I was surrounded by women who were older, women who were my peers, people who were giving me access to that language, access to, I think what you're saying is so important. You know, if we don't even have the words, we kind of have to start with the languaging in order to be able to then go into deeper communication. And, you know, I always say when we're talking about men's sexual health in particular, that we're really behind the times in terms of, you know, where, although there's certainly plenty, right? We're certainly living in a time where there's a lot that's happening around taking things away from women. Overall, the strides that we've made around intimacy and sexual health, we're ahead of the curve, you know, and we see that, you know, just in the death rate for men, you know, and the impact of that. So, you know, I really feel that. I wonder, I mean, we're going to talk more about this, but just because you've said it and I want to make things accessible to people right off the bat, could you give an example of could you give an example of what you like when you say being able to kind of to check in with the body, right? Could you give an example of what that would sound like or look like? We have a lot of, especially people who are challenged with erectile disappointment, right? Or, you know, ebbs and flows. That one of the things that I see is that there really is a cutoff between the head, this head, and the whole rest of the body. So, this idea of checking in with my body and being able to say something from my body, that can be pretty foreign. So, you're advanced in this. Give us an example of what that actually looks like.
So I'll use my own experience. I was diagnosed with genital herpes in, I think it was 2013, and it was really difficult of a time for me at that time. And the first woman that I had sex with after my diagnosis, this was someone we didn't talk about sexual health. We were just going to wear a condom. So I didn't tell her that I had herpes. And going into that sexual encounter, I'm like, struggling to put the condom on. And this
Mm,
is like one of the first times that I've ever experienced like a challenge with getting and maintaining an erection. So as I'm trying to put the condom on, I'm like not all the way hard. I'm in and out of hardness and
mm,
attempting to uh, keep put the condom on. And by the end of it, it didn't feel good. So I mean, I later told her before we could do anything again, but I recognized that the reason that I was having that experience, that disconnect, was because I didn't tell her about my herpes status.
mm,
So there's an inconsistency with the person that I believe myself to be, which is someone of integrity, someone who
mm,
doesn't withhold information, and then behaving in a way, knowing that I have this information that I'm keeping to myself, that I'm not giving to this person, and that being a direct impact on the body, right? A lot of us don't take the time to inquire on that.
mm,
There was another time, this was actually more recently, where there was someone that I was hooking up with. We were going to have like a one time thing, and I wasn't truthful in what my intentions were. Like, it was like, yeah, I want to sleep with you. And I just, the way that I worded it, it wasn't really in alignment.
mm.
And like, I wasn't able to stay hard that time either, because it was like I'm doing this under the guise of something else, right?
Yeah.
So I spoke to her, after the fact. I just told her, I was like, hey, I gotta tell you this. So I know that this was what we talked about and how we talked about this looking, but I gotta tell you, like, this is what I really want with you. This is the kind of sex I want to have. And so when I was clear about that, she was just like, oh, okay. And then the next time we were able to make it work. There was none of that. And so what a lot of what I learned personally from specifically those two experiences is that I felt like not a smoothness in my body. There's
Mm,
resistance that comes whenever there's any sort of inconsistency between my behaviors and beliefs. And in the sexual context, that's what happened. There was a block. right? Like I'm unable to get and
Mhm.
maintain an erection in this particular area of the body. And the same thing happens, I think, with intense emotions such as anger. Like in those moments, yeah, there's disappointment, but I also think that there's a another emotion that maybe we aren't able to readily identify, right? So there might be shame, there might be
Mhm.
guilt, there might be embarrassment, there might be disappointment in yourself. There may be, this state of desire. It's like, oh my God, I really want to have sex with this person. I really want to get an erection. But what when we have those moments of friction between our behaviors and our values, I think that that's where we start to feel an
Mhm.
emotion in the area of the body that is representative of that emotion being blocked.
Mm. Love it. Thank you. Those were great examples. And as you were saying that, there's a term that I use in my work, which is cock confusion. And often and often that shows up more in the sense of, um, you know, I the penis is in this like, am I allowed? Am I not allowed? Right? Here I am in this and a beautiful woman, but am I allowed now, especially in the world we're in now? Am I allowed to notice or am I supposed to suppress my feeling? Am I allowed to, I grew up in the catcall days, in going to New York, especially, right? So there's a lot of like, the body is confused. I think for a lot of men, there's a lot of confusion right now about, how am I supposed to show up? Can I show up? And I have certainly seen with a number of my clients where they'll come to me and say, I'm having trouble maintaining an erection or getting and maintaining an erection. And then just like what you described, they'll then tell me kind of what the dynamic of the relationship is where they're not feeling completely straightforward or honest, or there's something that they're wanting to ask the partner to tend to for them, but as the man, they feel like they can't ask for that. And so, then they're having difficulty. And when they describe it, I'm like, if I was your penis, I wouldn't really show up for that party either because, things aren't really settled in the body. So I really appreciate you sharing and bringing that. And that kind of circles back a little bit to when you were talking about, the difference between, traditional therapy and what someone like you is bringing, someone like what I'm bringing, what other people, that we know are bringing, which is also that as we're working with people around intimacy and vulnerability, that having models available, and I certainly find this more working with men, where there isn't a barrier to sharing our own personal stories. Because sometimes sharing our own personal stories is the thing that makes connection, that makes people feel not alone, that makes people go, oh, I can trust you because you actually have lived experience that makes me feel seen and heard and safer. And so it's nice to be able to, offer containers where that kind of human to human, person to person story sharing is also something that's available. And I really appreciate that that's a big part of who you are and why so many people are drawn to, to you as a safe person.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking a little bit more to that too, right? Like, I think that from what we've seen, I guess, in academics, I mentioned the financial inaccessibility, but also uh, the relatability, right?
Mhm.
There's all these rules that people who have the letters behind their names have to abide by. Some people, right, just sometimes just need a friend. They just need somebody that they can be seen in front of. And I think that this is one of the more powerful tools of something like yoga. What that offers is just like that sense of safety, of being able to, in a non-judgmental setting, be able to be yourself. And you mentioned the vulnerability piece, right? And for a therapist, it's inaccessible, or it's difficult, or not difficult, but it's against guidelines for
Mhm.
them to share too much information about themselves or
Right.
self-disclose. And I think that when you get into a certain tax bracket, everything just kind of becomes transactional. It's like, all right, here's $200. I'm gonna talk to you for an hour, and then I'm gonna be able to go and do the thing that brought me here in the first place. So it's kind of like a decompression chamber,
Mm.
so to
Yeah.
speak. So I'm paying to be able to tolerate more of this thing. Maybe I change, maybe I get better at it, but who knows, right? And what I see in just the one-on-one conversations that I have with people, like I've not ever offered tools for them to take out into the world to re-engage the thing that they're engaging with. I'm more so just offer a space where I'm very low risk in the
Mhm.
sense of yes, I'm accessible. Um, but I'm low risk in the sense they can tell me things and disclose very personal
Yeah.
information. And then if I respond in a way that is bad or negative, it's low risk, right? Whereas if they were to tell a friend, it's high risk because they may abandon them, they may leave, they may become absent, they may judge them, right? So offering that low risk of safety and then for them to be able to say the thing. And then I go, all right, well, I kind of went through that too, or this is a normal thing. You're
Mhm.
not the only person. There's this huge sense of relief that just comes with that. And I think that there are a number of healing modalities that are accessible and more available to people that if they just saw more representation, perhaps of people who maybe reflect their values, their beliefs, their skin color, the way that they talk, right? Then we would be able to offer more psychological accessibility to
Mhm.
them. But that representation and that vulnerability is so important because it literally gives an example of what expressing that vulnerability, those feelings, that way of being looks like in the form of a person who's like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that. So needed. So needed. I see this with men in general, and certainly I see this more with the Black men in my life and in both in my personal life and my work, where just the idea of therapy is such a barrier. And so expanding what's available for mental health, expanding what's available for education, expanding this idea of having more of a care team, is really, that can be the in. For me, I work with the penis because when I was working as an herbalist and as a massage therapist and doing all of my somatic work, only women were coming to me, right? But the moment that I opened up, hey, let me help you with your erections, then lifestyle change became more accessible, right? More because you kind of have to do that, right? You have to have the carrot that gets us, that gets the mind to say, okay, I'm willing to do some work. I'm willing to do some change, right? So before we go into this conversation, I do want to check in with you because I know that not everybody resonates with the word cock as their word, and it can be loaded for some people. There's a lot of history. So checking in before we move any further on this conversation, do you have a preference? Is there some, do you have is cock a triggery word? Do you prefer dick? Is anything that you have a preference for?
I think I say dick more than anything else.
Okay.
Cock kind of makes me chuckle. It just doesn't sound right coming from me.
Good. Okay. Well, as we have on one of our other conversations, I've been calling it, welcome to Degly Dick Appreciation Week. Yes. Or the mellow mound or the sleepy serpent, whatever it may be. We're just appreciating that, we don't need men to be hard all the time. And that's both in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom, right? That most of the time men are walking around soft, right? That the penis is soft. And yet we have so much stuff around, needing this hardness in order to both for people with a penis to feel like this means that I'm adequate, and people who are their partners to feel like they like me, right? And a big part of what we're trying to do is just demystify all that. So your specialty, one of your many specialties, is working around stigma. And one of the reasons I was really excited to, have this conversation with you is, I'm curious what you have learned in your journey around working with stigma around HSV and STIs, and how we could maybe take some of those things, because the stigma around erectile function really seems to be one of these like stalwart stigmas that men really don't talk to each other about this. That no matter, I can work with men and they can have incredible changes, but they won't refer their friends to me because they don't want to talk to their friends about the fact that something was wrong in the first place. Yet, what we know from a health perspective, and you're very health conscious and health education forward, is that, changes in erectile function can predict heart disease 3 to 7 years before the heart actually sends the big message, can predict diabetes, can predict prostate cancer, can predict, other physiological as well as mental health issues. And yet we don't talk about this. We don't talk about it. Men don't talk about it with each other. They often are not talking about it with a partner, until it becomes obvious. And even then, and they also aren't necessarily talking about it with their medical providers. So, how do we start to think about ways to get this conversation to be less stigmatized and more just a normal way of bringing up truth, which is the examples that you gave in the beginning, when we're communicating with, both our, our guy friends and our partners, whatever gender they may be?
Well, why would I talk about it? Right. So if we look at it from a man's perspective, what is talking about it going to do?
Mm,
Logically, it doesn't. I mean, it makes sense that we don't talk about it. It makes sense because we're supposed to be what everything around us is telling us to strive for. You watch porn, how often do you see a soft penis in porn? If you listen to music, who's talking about getting an erection, who's rapping about or singing about any of these kinds of struggles, right? So we have this idea of perfection and hardness and stiffness and firmness, right? All of the things that are supposed to be represented in being a man. And I think that collectively as a society, a lot of us are performing.
mm,
And the healing comes when we just get tired. We start to talk about it because now something's wrong, right? Like when something becomes wrong, when this aspect of my masculinity, my manhood, my identity that is so interconnected with my sexuality is now actually causing problems. Not only am I not getting um, blood flow to the penis, but I'm also not able to have sex. And sex is so much more than that intercourse portion of sticking an erect penis into something, but a lot of us don't even know that. So we have very limited perspective on what sex is, how sex can look outside of utilizing an erect penis. And there's no, because if you do talk about it, right, according to all of the messaging that comes in at us, we don't even see a flaccid penis in sex education and anatomy,
mm,
right? So we're learning about penises in their prime form of being erect, and that's what our baseline is. So if we're not at baseline, then something's wrong. So and I also want to say, I don't think men are not necessarily talking about it, right? They're more so seeking solutions. If I can go on the internet and look up what's wrong with my penis, and I get, oh, well, take this pill, right?
mhm,
I don't have to talk to anybody.
right,
So it's not just that it doesn't really make sense to, because I'm not being given any solutions, but I also have the tools available to me to have a quick fix,
mm,
right? So as we begin to learn that there this is like a normal process, and that it's important for us to be able to take action when there is something off, like we want to maintain what we have, until we as men can get to a place of maintaining wellness and recognizing what our baseline is, we're
Mm,
probably going to continue to begin to treat problems after it becomes a problem. So I think that how we begin to get men to talk about uh, their erectile challenges, that's going to really start with looking at the relationship that we have with our penis. Look at the relationship we have with our body. Look at the
mhm,
relationship that we have with our emotions and what else is happening within our lifestyles. So, like you said, you mentioned you don't have a problem getting people to make lifestyle changes, and then they go on to live happy, healthy lives, and they're able to have this newfound relationship with their penis, but they're not telling people, hey, I had this problem, now it's fixed, which logically makes sense, because why would I tell someone I had a problem
mhm,
if I no longer have the problem and I don't need anything? So we don't go around and just say, hey, I found this amazing thing and it helped, it worked, because now we also have to admit that there was a problem.
mhm,
So, yeah, so much of it is just there needs to be a normalization of what bodies look like. We have to begin having conversations around sex outside of an erect penis. Like, I
mhm.
think that this is something that sex positivity does beautifully, because sex is so much more than an erect penis going into a hole, right? We have all of the aspects of kink and BDSM. We have platonic touch. We have different types of touch. We have all of these ways to experience pleasure in a space where an erect penis is not the center of attention. Yet all of the mainstream media tells us that the penis is the center of sex.
Right. Right, absolutely. And that's why we're actually this year, we are having a soft cock forward erotic open mic as part of our celebration, because this came up last year, right? That there's no, without the representation, if people aren't seeing it, because that's something I hear all the time. Well, I don't see this in porn, so I don't believe you. I don't believe you when you say that it's okay if I'm not hard. Because if that was actually okay, if other women besides you, if other people besides you actually thought that, we would see a lot more of this. So, my hope is that we will, that the more that over time we'll start to see, just as we're starting to see changes in the way that, not necessarily in traditional porn, but in alternative porn, we're starting to see more representation of other types of body types, especially for female bodies, that we start to see that more for men as well. We kind of get some broaden the vision. But I want to ask you, why would I talk about this? And of course, for me, because I lost a partner because we didn't talk about this, you know, I feel like that's my mission, right? I want men to talk to each other when their bodies are changing, because that one person who says, hey, maybe you should get checked for diabetes, right? Hey, maybe you should get something checked out. It can be a matter of life and death. And yet, we're not talking about penises. So that leads to, then it can be very lonely and isolating, right? Because I think the point that you made is fabulous, which is, I do think that a lot of people who are feeling scared, feeling isolated, feeling lonely, lonely in the sense of, I'm the only one who is having an erectile issue. And even, then maybe they go on a Reddit thread, or maybe they go somewhere online and they get a lot of, information, but it's not necessarily from their close companions or their community, right? And maybe they build community, but it still ends up being feeling isolating. And, one of the things about stigma, right, is that we know that when we feel like I'm the only one going through this, or my life is now, I think, especially, right, like, because I'm having this issue with my sexuality, that means I'm done having sex forever. I hear that a lot, right? Because I can't maintain an erection, this means sex is over. And absolutely, we're trying to expand that, but it can do a number, going back to what we were saying about mental health. So you have worked a lot with people on helping them transition from being in the isolation and living in the, I have a scarlet letter on me, to finding ways to language, finding ways to communicate, finding ways to be okay and accepting with the fact that your body is what it is. So what are some ways that you help people or that you've seen people make that adjustment to, acceptance, right? So that then the feeling of I'm never going to get out of this and I'm all by myself in it, to, oh, you know what, this is just part of who I am and how I live.
I think it's identity validation. So the whole origin story for something positive for positive people and this sexual health related work with stigma started because I saw that people with herpes wanted it in their lives. And so as I began to investigate, I started the podcast interviewing people with herpes about their experiences. Um, Consistently, we see 36% of people say that they have suicide ideation after their diagnosis. And so I used to think that suicide was about sadness. You're sad, you want to end your life. Then I learned that it was about loss of control
Mm,
from a grief counselor. And then the more I talk to people, the more I recognize that it's actually something else, and that's identity invalidation. So, who you are, who you believe yourself to have been, who you see yourself as now, who you thought you would be in the future, these are all things that are related to grief. But what I find is that in a space where you can have your identity validated as a person aside from your sexuality, that's where the healing really begins. So you kind of just direct people's attention from sex, herpes, no one's going to want to be with me, to, oh, yeah, I really like playing music. Oh, I really
mm,
like to cook food. Like I'm creative, right? And as people, you know, I try and get people to open up and talk to people around them because, like I said earlier, I'm low risk. If I don't respond to your DM, if I tell you you ain't shit, you are terrible looking and you're never going to have sex again, I'm low risk because I'm a stranger.
mhm,
But if you go off and you tell your best friend of 20 years, hey, I have herpes, and you're anticipating, which I don't know why people like think that they have friends who would do this to them, but people anticipate the worst possible response from the people who can help them through this the most. Because how you deliver your diagnosis to someone, it's very much telling of, based on their response, what the relationship is or what it always has been. So one of the first people that I told was actually one of my good friends' girlfriends at the time. I used to get so annoyed that they would tell me, it'd be like, "You're not over your ex, you're not over your ex." And I got mad. And I was like,
mm,
that's not what it is. I have herpes. I don't want to tell anybody. And it felt so good to just say. But
mm,
then it felt better when she looked at me. She was like, "Oh, all right, doesn't everybody have herpes?" I mean, I don't, but and I was just like, huh, that wasn't bad. And we continued to have our friendship as we did. We'd still go out. I still got invited to things, a bunch of random stuff that I never really, cared for or thought about doing before. And then they saw me and received me as a friend still.
mm,
So my identity was validated in that friendship. You're someone who's known me, we've hung out for a few years, this is what we do, we socialize, we go out, we dance, we party, and you still see me as that person. You didn't want to stop hanging out with me, socializing and dancing and singing.
mm,
So had you done that, it would have been invalidating to who I saw myself to be in relation to this friendship, this connection that we have. So, me being low risk, a friend being high risk, I'm kind of sort of this gateway into getting people to talk to the people around them about it, because that's who can validate your identity. All I got is whatever information you give me on the intake form, whatever I scroll through on social media, and that's it. But the people who've known you can say to you, "Oh, well, you're still the best artist I know. You're
mm,
still, my friend that's good at basketball, right? Like we still have these common interests, and it doesn't change any of these intangible aspects of yourself. But we get so locked into this sexual part of ourselves, just our genitals and how we relate to them, that that becomes who we are. So people who don't see that getting to remind us, hey, you're the same person you were 10
Mhm.
seconds before you got that diagnosis. That's how we begin to get people to accept and move forward through the stigma.
Yeah. I really, really appreciate that you said it that way and that you're bringing it that way. I think for a lot of men, there's like this template of body. Like for me as a woman, from the time I started menstruating, I've known that my body is always in flux. And I think for a lot of men, there's like this, I have this template of my body, and then it's like this big surprise that happens when, the thing, for a lot of what I hear from men is my penis was a thing I didn't ever have to think about, right? This was the thing that, like, I have so many other things that are stressing me out that I'm thinking about that I'm doing. But, like, the fact that, like, I saw boobs and my dick got hard, like, I know that was just like, and now that that isn't me, there is, it is a grief, right? But really what you're saying really goes to the heart of it, because it's a loss, but it's this loss of, this is the person that I thought I was. This is the relationship with my penis that I thought I had. So there's a little bit of betrayal there too, right? This feeling of my body is working against me, right? So we have to kind of break through that piece of, inner dialogue. And then this, you know, if I'm not I'm no longer this person, and I, you know, yes, I'm a great musician. Yes, I'm all of these other things, but, but, like, I want my dick to be what it used to be, right? Like, that's the thing. It's like, I hear this all the time. I'm 45, but I want my 25-year-old body, right? I'm 70 and I want my 50-year-old body. There's this, like, this inability to kind of be okay with aging and changing.
You mentioned like how since you began menstruating, you knew that this was just gonna always happen, right?
Mhm,
And for us, it's not that, it seemingly just comes at us. Our bodies are always changing and responding to different things. We just aren't always present with that. So, incorporating some form of a presence practice where you can be with your body and just accept, okay, my attractions change. The things that I used to get turned on by when I first started getting erections that I noticed are significantly different than what turns me on now.
mhm,
And there wasn't just a stopping point between there and here. It was something that I noticed and I just accepted, right? Like certain lifestyles,
mhm,
certain uh, looks, certain conversations. These were the things that turned me on. And now there are just things that I ain't gonna say need to be present, but there needs to be a sense of acceptance within myself of the fact that my body is changing what it's turned on by, what it's attracted to. And that it's not just my penis that does that. It's the responsiveness of other parts of myself, right?
mhm,
Like in relationships, looking at what changes happen for compatibility, right? Casual sex no longer appeals to me, right? Like it's now I'm able to deconstruct what sex actually means, and it is an avenue for connecting with someone who we're doing life together. We're merging
mhm,
existences for the sake of our bigger picture and purpose to one another. So until we can look at our relationships to our bodies, be present with that, understand what our relationship to sex is, what sex means, if we can't get sex and have that sense of fulfillment that it had given us before, we got to deconstruct. Okay, well, what do I get out of sex? What is it? What's the feeling that I get
Mm.
from it? And what other ways can I get that feeling? And that's kind of part of the healing process. We're very attached to our idea of our age, our vitality, and we really just got to get into the practice of being present with it as it is so we can just let that shit go, because even our attachment to our 50-year-old body and our 70-year-old body is creating an emotional block that
Mhm.
might even be preventing us from getting that blood flow to the penis. It may be that we're resisting accepting that our attraction has changed.
And accepting, one of the things that I see, Courtney, is that, there is this relationship between the mind body where if the mind is acting sort of like the punishing parent of, I don't accept you, why aren't you? What is wrong with you? The penis is like gonna feel sort of that anxious attachment or that avoidant attachment of like, why should I show up if the way I am isn't being loved and accepted by you? So, there's deep healing that comes when we can roll with the reality of where we are. You brought up two things I want to touch back on. You said a presence practice. Is that what you said? Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little, what is that? Let's dive into that. What is that?
Yeah, so for me, it's just yoga, something that you consistently do. Presence practice sounds like cooler than yoga because I think that yoga over the years has been given a bad rep because it looks like Pilates. We see
Mhm.
thin white women in upside down poses, and people think that's what yoga is. No, yoga is it's unity, it's oneness, right? So, at what point in time are you allowing for yourself to have some sort of stillness where there is no constant inward direction of things into your space, your mind, your energy, your bubble from all these different aspects of life, right? Because our awareness and attention is always in so many places: our job, our passion, our hobbies, interests, relationship, our podcasting, or things that we should do, things that we didn't do, regret. So I just named off maybe a dozen different places where our awareness is out there. A presence practice really gives you time to detach your sort of awareness claw from the thing
Mm.
and free up that space, because we're exerting energy, right? Like if you were to close and make a fist and just hold that for a really long time, like what's happening? You're starting to get a little tired. Maybe it's
Mhm.
getting weak, but you're trying to force it closed. And then when you relax that hand open, it's still a little more closed. But in an ideal, scenario, eventually it'll be able to open. So energetically, we are clenching our fists around some aspect of our identity from something that is getting so much more of our attention and awareness than it needs. So a presence practice allows for us to ungrasp that thing and free ourselves up to take our awareness into ourselves so that we can more so focus it. And I'm imagining like a bigger hand. So there's like three things that maybe need a lot of our attention, but we're able to focus more and bring a greater quality of attentiveness and awareness to that thing, but only when we recharge it. So that's what a presence practice is for me. If that's just you sitting down for 10 minutes and just breathing, if it's you just walking outside in nature, if it is a yoga class,
Mhm.
these are different forms of a presence practice where you just practice being present with yourself and what's happening in your body.
Yeah, taking the time to notice that you even have a body. Sometimes I have people just every time that they're stopped at a red light, then I have them notice, oh, I'm sitting, in the seat of my car. So can I feel my perineum touching the seat? Can I, where are my testicles, or where is my vulva? Like where is my back? Like just during this, whatever it is, 1 minute of the red light, can I not be in my mental, where am I going? Where have I been? Da, 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 da. But just starting with, okay, I'm in my body and I'm getting some feedback from, the proprioceptive feedback of, oh, my foot's on the brake, my butt's on the chair, my back is touching something, I'm in my body. And then the green light happens. And then, you're driving, you're thinking. Sometimes we have to start with getting to 10 minutes can be a lot for people to be present. But presence practice, I was so happy that you said it, because presence practice is also such a huge part of great sex, right? That being able to be in flow state, right? To be able to not have all, and I think, especially when we're in this issue of, how is my dick going to perform? What's going to happen? Am I going to get hard? Am I going to get hard and lose it? If I change positions, am I going to lose it? Blah, 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 blah. There's just so much mental chatter that can happen, as opposed to, you know, hey, whether it's with myself or with someone else, this is my time to be in my body and enjoy, right? And whatever it is that we're doing, let me just be present to it and feel it, and let myself feel the good hormones surging through my body. But, the mind really gets in the way.
Yeah. The When you ask people what makes bad sex, I think most people will probably just say communication, right? Like a person who can't communicate. When you ask people what makes good sex, there's going to be some way, form, or fashion that they're going to say presence.
Mm,
Like you mentioned, if you're constantly thinking and worried about these different thoughts, each of those thoughts is sort of that hand activity of your awareness that your presence is not here,
yeah.
right? Your attention, your awareness is everywhere else. And if you're not going to be here with me, I might as well masturbate, right? And that doesn't feel good to be in the presence of another body and that body be somewhere else,
Hmm.
right? We violate ourselves in that sense by um putting ourselves, in we want to have sex, but we're not actually there. We're dissociating or we're performing it. And that to me has not historically been good sex. That's validation. If you want to just show up for the job, get the job done,
Mm,
all right, cool. That's gratification. Whereas if you're able to show up present with another present person and engage in sex the way that you both want to, where you're present, you're responsive to each other, you're getting your needs met out of it, and everyone's just kind of doing what they want to do, and there's this perfect dance that just happens. The perfection comes from really just being present, right? So taking the pressure off of yourself allows for you to just be present, right? It's all presence, no pressure. And so that's what I think really makes for good sex. And when you start to apply it to your sex life, it has to happen in other ways because
hmm.
you're not going to let other things ruin that for you. You're going to let this thing spill into the rest of your life and make those other things better for you.
Amen. I can imagine people saying, like, oh, easier said than done. But it really goes back to the bad sex for me is when there's frustration energy in the room, because it's so palpable, that sense, that feeling that somebody is like frustrated with the way that their body is behaving, and so they can't be present because the frustration energy. And I can see, I see the erection wilt, anything that was there. But also, like, this is where there are so many other things to do. There are so many other ways to be with somebody intimately, that it's one of the ways to move frustration out, one of the ways to be present is, I think, sometimes to just, you know, communicate, right? That, this is the reality of where I'm at. And so what can we do? And this brings me back to the other question. I said there were two things that you had said. So one was the presence practice. And then the other question I have for you is you're sort of a master at this point of being able to communicate, hey, this is my truth, this is my reality. And, you know, and then like, let's play, right? Let's have a good time. So if you were a person, like let's say you were somebody now who is struggling with erectile function, okay, and you wanted to be able to be present with me, what would be the way that you would communicate off the top to let me know, hey, this is the reality of what's going on with my body? And da 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 da, right? Like take some of that. Like I know you've done a lot of this around the HSV work, but I'm curious, how the link, like how we can model for people who are watching or listening, just an example of a simple way to be able to put it out there.
I'm glad that you brought up the herpes thing too, because I think it is very similar in the sense of I try to get people out of the thought process of I have to tell you something and it might be a bad thing,
Mhm.
going from, okay, I have herpes, and then waiting on a person to be okay with that. I think the same thing would be, hey, I don't always get an erection. You okay with that? Right? It's a discussion. It's something that, we have to come to terms with our own relationship with it. And I think that in the same way that we would come to terms for a herpes diagnosis and needing to, just have a discussion around that, it looks like, all right, there's all these other aspects of our relationship, right? Are we compatible? Do we want the same things? Is this a one time
Mhm.
thing? What kind of sex do we like? What don't we like? What are our boundaries, right? So, having a discussion beforehand can often offer up before you even get to the point of talking about the thing that you may struggle to talk about, like a herpes diagnosis. A person may share with you, I don't really like people with herpes. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for telling me. All right. I know I need to go ahead and go the other way because I'm
Mhm.
someone who has herpes. And as you have this conversation, if someone's telling you, oh, yeah, I need like a rock hard dick, or however they would word it, right? Then this has been a discussion, right? So in having the discussion, you get there, or maybe you don't, right?
Mhm.
So let's say the conversation is going well. You know that you like the same things sexually. The things that you don't like are okay with them. The things that they don't like is okay with you. Um, and you have an idea of what this interaction relationship is going to look like, it might not happen, but it might happen. So inviting it as a discussion for a more expansive view of what sex is and looks like means that you can choose to engage with it, or you can choose not to engage with it, but not in a way that's avoidant, right?
Mhm.
We're not avoiding contact with the penis, like, going down on someone and just not letting them touch your penis at all. It can just be, all right, hey, before we get into this, I know that we talked a little bit about some things that we like, and I like my penis to be touched in these ways,
Mhm.
right? So just offering that, but we really got to know and identify what we like in our bodies in order to be able to communicate these things. It's difficult, it's challenging when it's a surprise, when it's happening in the moment. But when we know, like, it also demonstrates this confidence that our partners will appreciate about us, that we're able to be vulnerable. Like this
Mhm.
vulnerability, even with herpes disclosures, people really appreciate that. And oftentimes I've heard from people who say, they told someone that they have herpes and they were like, oh my God, like I'm more attracted to you now. I know how hard it was to say
Mhm.
that. So don't look at it as I'm coming with this broken thing. I'm coming to you imperfect as a human because humans are imperfect. I'm just aware of it. And I think that that's something that demonstrates vulnerability, which people are hungry for. So to be able to present that in a time where there's so much of like of emotionally avoided dating where you have to protect yourself from
Mhm.
being emotionally hurt. We're not seeing a lot of vulnerability. So when we express that, when we pioneer that shit, the other person might be like, damn, you know what? I've never done that before. I've never played with a soft penis. All right, cool. And there's that excitement, that enthusiasm, that curiosity, right?
Mhm.
And before you know it, like, because you've lost your attachment to your hard penis and your beliefs around that, it's freed you up to where now psychologically, energetically, emotionally, you might have the most intense, attraction to this
Right.
person, and it brings a new form of pleasure into the room. So, to answer your question, it's really about knowing that for yourself and understanding that this is a much more broad discussion
Mhm.
than it is a disclosure. So, you have this information, hey, this is what sex typically looks like for people, but what's it look like for you? Well, here's what I like. Because some people really like when you know what you like and you communicate that, because
Mhm.
more often than not, when people who want to have sex with us, they want us to feel good. And we also want, we want to make them feel good. So being able to communicate and identify the ways that we can bring one another pleasure, especially under whatever circumstances we have, I think it just makes for a much better encounter, and it makes it a lot easier for us to talk about the challenges or what's different about the
Mhm.
kind of sex that we like to have.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's also making me think about when you were talking about the identity piece, because we were talking about, okay, my dick isn't hard all the time, but, I'm a great, chef. So there's that. But also within sexuality, that piece of being able to know too, this is my reality. My reality is, either I can't get hard at all. Maybe I've had a prostatectomy and I just or I have diabetes and hardness isn't even part of my equation. But I'm really great with a toy, right? I'm really good with my hands. I love to go down. I love to suck on nipples. I love to brush your hair. I'm really good with massage. Like, what are the other things inside of, outer course that you can add into your identity and feel excited and proud to be able to put that on the table too. The conversation tends to be like, I know what I like because I've seen it on porn, you know, but like to actually get to the practical place of I know what I like, that takes some exploration, right? How do
Oh
you how do
yeah,
you even how do you even get from 0 to 1 on that path?
trauma. uh, yeah, it took me getting herpes.
Uh-huh.
I had to lose my connection with my go-to sex thing, which was my penis. So
Mhm.
losing that, I had to find a new way to connect with sex and sexuality. So this looked like having conversations that were outside of what intercourse looks like. It looked like having to maybe overcompensate and learn other techniques or figure out other ways of pleasing a partner or other ways
Mhm.
of pleasing myself or being pleased or offering that communication. So it is difficult because it's not modeled for us, and the go-to places for any type of sex education, right? Initially, I think a lot of us have fear-based sex education that tells us don't get anybody pregnant, don't get an
Mhm.
STI, and that's the extent of it. And then we become adults and we're hearing the music, we're seeing the porn, we're watching the movies. And in movies, there's no conversation about
Mhm.
erections or condom use. You just see the eye contact and the touching, and then they're under the covers, you hear the heavy breathing, and that's all you know about sex, right? So as we continue to do things like this, I think that we just have to continue to put our work out there in a way that uplifts the stories and experiences of people who can serve as models of these alternative lifestyles, because not alternative lifestyle, that was something completely different, but these alternative ways of experiencing sex, um, so that we can get more comfortable with that, because we need to be able to talk about it,
Mhm.
and we don't have a lot of resources that teach us or give us the practice of talking about our bodies even.
Yep. Well, and that's why you're there. And that's why I'm here, right? Is to just get it goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is just starting with the languaging. And I really like that you keep bringing this up because, we're not born out of the womb speaking, right? People are speaking around us, and then we learn some basics, and then we learn a little bit more complexity, and then we learn a little bit more. So, a lot of what we're doing, really the ethos of Self Cock Appreciation Week is having these conversations, modeling these conversations, showing lots of different people basically coming down and saying the same thing, which is it begins with being able to say, this is who I am. I'm a work in progress, right? I'm learning and this is what I'm trying now. I'm going to be vulnerable and that it's okay, that it's really okay for people who have a penis to be the one who's vulnerable. And I think part of my response to some of what we were just talking about is also that it's really important for the partner. I think you brought up a couple things around how the partner responds really makes a difference. If someone says to me, Erica, I don't know what's going to happen. I have erectile. I mean, this is what happened with my partner, right? Is we were like 3 months into our relationship, and I finally just said, I really appreciate that you love eating my pussy, but like, I do like penetration. So what's going on? And he said, um, well, I have these erectile ebbs and flows, right? I can't always maintain an erection. And when I have been dating other women, they took that personally. And so I just realized that it was easier for me to focus on being a giver than have to go through the tending to their response to what was happening to my body.
Yeah.
Right. And because I had a different attitude, I was able to say, thank you so much. Thank you for telling me that that's what's going on. Let's try this instead, which is when you are hard, we'll do something with your hardness. And when you aren't hard, what are all the other things that we like to do? Right. And we really then got to explore. I mean, the sex was so phenomenal because that was really my entry into loving playing with a soft dick and also loving and learning all the other things that turned me on, right? That having a man disclose to me or share with me, not even disclose, but share with me, this is the way my body works. First of all, allowed me to expand what I enjoy and figure things out together. And second, gave me the room to then say, well, this is how my body works. And especially as I've come through menopause, like I have a lot more empathy for the men that I work with who have erectile changes because, my clit changed, like my go-to changed. Everything that I knew was my like, oh, this is the way my body works has completely upended. And so now I have to go through that too of, oh, I need a little bit more of this. Or sometimes I'm not going to have an orgasm. Or that doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying myself or this or this. But the moment that somebody can say, this is who I am and what my body needs and how it works for maximum enjoyment and pleasure, it changes the whole, that's the de-stigma part, right? Of just like breaking through we can't talk to each other and share with each other the truth about the fact that we live in these, fleshy things.
Yeah, and so much of this stigma really is revolved around sex and the sexual conversations too, right? Like, if my body's not doing what I want my body to do, in the sense of like picking something up. Like I'm not as strong as I used to be. I may not want to admit that, but I'm more likely to admit that than any sort of sex thing that I'm having. So I'll talk about that. Like, oh man, I'm getting old, like my back hurting, or I can't play basketball like I used to. I'm not as fast as I used to. Oh, we'll talk about those things so casually too.
Right.
But it gets a little more, challenging, especially because of how men's sexuality is supposed to be received. And when it's not that, it's something's wrong.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's
Right. Or that it's acceptable, right? I mean, that's the other side of it, Courtney, if we're saying 50% of men by the age of 50 should expect that they no longer have a fully functioning penis, right? If I said to you, 50% of men at 50 should expect that they no longer have a functioning bicep, or they no longer have a functioning kidney, or they no longer have a functioning knee, right? We would have like so much healthcare. We would have like your yoga hit Pilates studio on every corner, right? 50% of men at 50, 60% at 60, 30% at 30. I mean, but because it's the penis, because we're talking about male sexuality, that's why I say like this is sort of the final frontier of the taboo and the stigma around, how is it that we accept that, oh, of course, as you age, this part of your body, is just, is going to wither up. It doesn't have to, right? Because we know heart health is penis health, brain health is penis health. You know, overall, we want to stay healthy. Yes. Okay, let me ask you two last things. So we've talked around stress, and stress is like, I just brought up these like heart, diabetes, prostate, other things in the body. But for so many people, stress is the reason that they're having erectile issues. And we've talked we've touched on it, but from your work in the world of yoga in particular, are there any, besides the presence practice, is there anything that you can offer, that you can share with us, that you have found to be a really great stress management tool?
um journaling is good.
Mm.
Um I happen to podcast, so having these conversations or just sorting out, things for myself, these are all helpful for me because as I talk, I work things out. As I write, things get worked out. Um, Having some sort of just a routine. I think a lot of people get ungrounded or feel like their life is chaotic when they don't have a routine, whether that be in
Mm.
the morning, in the nighttime, or in the middle of the day. Whenever the time works for you to be able to just do the things that you consistently need to be doing for yourself.
Mm.
Right. So, yeah, I think that that's important. Um, Eating, how I eat has evolved over the years to where I have to cook more food than I eat out. And a lot of times I only recently learned high blood pressure wise that my family used to always say, watch your salt, because everybody has high blood pressure in my family. So I was like, all right, I just won't add salt to my food. And I didn't learn until I was 34 years old that it's not the salt, it's the sodium in the
Mm.
salt. And a lot of foods have a lot of sodium in them. So when I started looking at the back of the food labels for groceries, and I'm starting to look at the food menu and I see so much of the thing that, I'm supposed to be avoiding is in everything that I eat, the frozen foods, the good tasting foods, the sauces, right? So carrying the way that I've been eating lately has changed, and I notice a difference in my health. I'm able to sleep through the entire night. I'm
Mm.
able to get up and be up for the day. I don't need naps all the time. So, and I notice a difference when I eat something that's not like when I eat differently. Um, Like if I'm on the road or if I got to pick up fast food or if I didn't cook it, I notice the difference.
Mm,
So caring for myself looks like also what I put into my body. It also looks like what I listen to. I've been listening to more podcasts and audiobooks more so than the music that, is most popular right now because it just doesn't serve me. What we put into our body, our energy field, I'm very mindful of these things now.
great. Those are all excellent suggestions. Yay, good. Okay, so how self-ed, first of all, this year for Soft Cock Appreciation, we are um
Itself.
selfed.
Yeah. I
Working.
yeah, I see what you did. So that's what okay. So when I in 2021, I believe is when I started the podcast Self, and it was like a wordplay on self-education because I had to
Mhm.
like learn this shit on my own.
Yeah.
And it was like all of the self-reflection, self-awareness, self-education, anything else that you could think of. But it was supposed to be wordplay on that. But self just kind of it stuck because we are looking at the self, the concept of
Mhm.
the self, and like that capital letter I versus that ego driven lowercase letter I.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I wanted to say that because
Perfect.
I heard
No,
you say
thank you.
self-ed. I was
I was
like,
doing
self-ed.
I was typing it. So, yes, and I knew it was a lowercase e. So, okay, so self is first of all we're really highlighting that this year we want people to know what you're doing. This is a new nonprofit. We want to guide people towards you, guide people. We're a free event, but if people are feeling our content, feeling what we're bringing this year, then we're really encouraging people to make a donation to you, to your organization, and see if we can get things off the ground. So tell us a little bit more about Self and the kind of like, you know, who, if people want to connect with it, what is it that what's the vision? What do it's for individuals or it's groups, it's online, it's in person. Just kind of give us like, what is and I know it's still nascent. I know it's still in development, but give us the picture.
Yeah, so Self, I started as just a podcast in 2021-ish, and I was just processing my therapy sessions and processing what I learned in my yoga teacher training. Because I was learning about emotions and what to do with them. So I took a little bit of a break from it to focus on something positive for positive people. And then I came back to it in 2023. And it was in June after attending a bunch of different men's mental health things. And I was like, I'm not getting anything out of this because I'll ask them, like, where do emotions come into play here? Because of all this yoga stuff I'm learning, I'm seeing that there's power in accessing and understanding our emotions, but no one's talking about that. So I've gone and I've asked questions about these things, and everybody kind of just like stares at the screen like I don't have a head or something. No one's able to talk to me about emotions in men. I've gone to black men's related things, and people get really uncomfortable with vulnerability. They get uncomfortable with emotions, but they're happy to talk about mental health and masculinity, but no one's talking
Mhm.
about the emotions and vulnerability and how we access those. So I decided to just make my own damn symposium. So I
Okay.
created the Men's Emotional Wellness Symposium. I reached out to a couple of men who were willing to just have a conversation about emotional availability, emotional intelligence. And we wanted to speak to emotionally immature or emotionally avoidant or emotionally ignorant people and kind of help them with language that would get them into seeing what emotional availability and emotional
Mm.
intelligence looked like. So we had 106, I think, people register for this, and I threw
Wow.
this together over the course of like 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm.
It was a virtual event. Um, and the success of it made me decide, wow, there's a need here and there needs to be more of it. And I'm already doing, this in another way. It just makes sense to make it more readily accessible and available. So I made it a nonprofit so that it could just be something that if people want to donate to, they can. I can get access to resources that allow for me to make these resources free and accessible. I just so happen to be a yoga teacher and I'm in a yoga therapy training, so that when the time comes, I'll be able to offer those offerings in a way that's much more available and accessible, teaching people the same things that I was able to learn and
Mm,
just distilling that information in a way that is much more psychologically accessible, as I keep saying, like making yoga. When people see yoga and they think about skinny white girl Pilates, they don't think about a 230-pound black man who used to play football
mhm,
or who hosts a podcast, right? So it's really putting myself out there in the vulnerable way, like we talked about earlier,
mhm,
so that people can just see something different because they'd be so turned off by that previous, messaging. And here's who yoga's for,
mhm,
when really yoga's for everybody. And I'm just more of a reflection of this being something or being one avenue of people who can perhaps relate and connect a little bit more to what yoga's offerings are. And it's not just the physical, it's more of the emotional wellness. I identify myself as a yoga informed emotional wellness practitioner.
mm,
And what I'd like to do is just support people using the sciences of yoga to restore emotional balance for themselves, to be able to identify and then use what our emotions have to teach us, because that's information. So the symposium. The next one's going to be November 30th. This is going to be
okay.
the Black Men's Emotional Wellness Symposium. Um,
Is that in
and we're
person or online?
virtual. Yeah.
Okay,
One day when we get some
uh-huh,
money,
okay.
we'll get a
So
place.
that's something that people who are listening or watching, because this will drop at the beginning of November or
Yeah.
mid-November. So that's something that people can sign up for.
Yes,
Okay.
you can register for
Mhm,
this one at getselfed.org slash events, and you'll see it's the only thing that's out there right now. But I
mhm,
also have recorded yoga classes that are releasing on a weekly basis using the work of David R. Hawkins from the book Letting Go,
mm,
where I teach a class. It's a restorative class, so you can do this virtually. You ain't even got to do it, you can just listen to it for real. But I speak through the emotions to help us identify the emotion, and then how to access it, neutralize the
mm.
intensity of it, and go on to let it go. So this is something I do every Sunday. It's recorded and uploaded. I got a YouTube channel with all those videos,
Okay.
but the overall thing is to support men with their emotional wellness. Yep.
And then if people want to connect with you for consulting or individual work, um, how do people
Yeah.
connect with you for that?
I'm glad you mentioned that because I just put peer emotional support on the website for
Okay,
self.
good, good.
Like I offer herpes support calls, but I'm doing the same thing for men. It's just donation based.
Hmm.
You just need to like talk to somebody.
Hmm.
This isn't mental health licensed therapy. This is very unconventional in the sense of like I'm a listen to you. I'm gonna ask you what do you think you need, and we'll go through and I will give you, it ain't necessarily advice, but it's me just really applying my yoga therapy techniques that I'm learning in a way that will allow for me to also create programs and facilitate people's being able to put into practice things that are going to help them with the issues that they come to me with. So yeah, these peer one-on-one support calls are just 30 minutes. You can find that on the website as well.
Excellent. And then the Something Positive for Positive People, is that its own site or how do people connect with that?
Yeah, so that's www.spfpp.org. And that is something positive for positive people. That's the herpes support resource. One of the things that we're doing now is hosting workshops to teach people how to talk about safety and pleasure. And that's a form of STI prevention outside of just condom use. So we're
Mhm.
teaching people how to communicate about their relationship needs, their safety needs, their pleasure needs, and to be able to identify those things.
Sometimes what I see, especially for people who have been leaving a long-term relationship and are going out into the dating world for the first time after, decades potentially, that sometimes the erectile variability can show up because there is this like I've been in a monogamous relationship and now I hooked up with I got married to my wife when I was 22 and now I'm 50 and I'm going out into the world and I don't understand STIs. I don't understand. I've never had to use a condom for the last 30 years. So if that's a resource that can help the mind get to presence, then I want to really encourage people the work that you're doing, and I know the care team, the support team that's over there, that may be something to check in with your body about and see, hey, is maybe the reason that I'm having some, erectile hesitancy is because there's a part of me that doesn't feel confident and knowledgeable about how to be clear with my language and my communication and understand, that this world of sexual openness, has risk tolerance levels in it. And it's nice to have people that you can talk to guide you through what you're, what's real, what you need to be aware of, and just how to determine for yourself what it is that is going to, what is it that's going to make you feel good so that the part of your mind that might be blocking you can, quiet down. So, Courtney, you're such a great resource for the world. I'm so grateful that you could be here with us for Soft Cock Appreciation Week. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me and for bringing me in on this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, everybody, this is another episode of Soft Cock Appreciation Week 2024. And we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in the future.